Kansas Territory, May of 1871. The sun was already burning high over the flat, endless plains when Lorraine Vaughn trudged back into town with another basket of eggs no one would buy. She could hear them before she even hit Main Street. Whispers, laughter. The word fat floated through the air like the dust kicked up by wagon wheels. She kept her chin up, but the sting never got easier. 24 years old, broad-hipped, strong-armed, and according to the town of Dawson's Creek, far too heavy to ever find a husband. Poor thing, one woman muttered near the mercantile. She is sweet enough. Just, who would want all that? Lorraine set the basket down harder than she meant to. The eggs rattled. Mr. Hanley, the store owner, gave her a look and shuffled over. "Let's just leave 'em, Miss Vaughn," he said, barely meeting her eye. "Ain't much call today." She swallowed the familiar lump in her throat, nodded, and left the eggs on the stoop. She did not cry. She would not give them that. The town of Dawson's Creek had not always been cruel. Once, when she was a girl, she had been just Lorraine, running wild across the prairie with her brother and the neighbor boys. But time had a way of hardening people, and it had hardened them against her. She crossed the street, skirts dusting the dirt, hurrying past the saloon where the lazy-eyed men lounged in the doorway. She heard their snickering, but she kept walking toward the livery stable. Her family's farm needed supplies, and if no one would buy her eggs, she would have to trade for feed somehow. That was when she saw him. A man stood by the corral, brushing down a tall chestnut horse. He was broad-shouldered, weathered, with hair the color of dry wheat and a beard that looked hastily trimmed. His shirt was worn but clean, sleeves rolled up to his elbows. His hat was pulled low, but when he looked up, she caught the flash of startlingly blue eyes. He saw her, really saw her, like he was not looking at a problem to be pitted, but a person. Lorraine startled and looked away, heart thumping. "Afternoon, miss," he said, voice low and warm. She nodded, fumbling with the strap of her basket. "Good afternoon." "Name's Roman Callahan," he said, stepping closer. "Horse trader. Just come through from Abilene." She knew the name. Callahan's Horses. He had a reputation, fair, honest, good stock. She bit her lip, unsure what to say. Men in Dawson's Creek did not talk to her unless they had to. "You looking to trade?" Roman asked, nodding toward her empty basket. Lorraine half laughed. "Not exactly. Was hoping to sell. No one is buying." Roman studied her a moment, then wiped his hands on a cloth and stepped around the fence. "Tell you what, I could use some eggs. Beats the trail meals I have been eating. How about I buy the lot?" "You would," she blurted, too quick. He smiled, and there was nothing mocking about it. "Sure would." Lorraine fought the embarrassed heat rising to her face. "That is kind of you, Mr. Callahan." "Roman," he corrected gently. "Roman," she echoed, feeling foolish and young and something she had not felt in a long time, hopeful. They exchanged the basket for a few coins, more than fair. She tucked them into her apron, heart light. "Say," Roman said, tilting his head. "You would not happen to know who has the best hay around here, would you?" "My father," Lorraine said, pride slipping into her voice before she could stop it. "Vaughn Farm. South end of town." "Then I reckon I will pay him a visit," Roman said, smiling again. "Maybe I will see you there." Lorraine nodded, breathless. As she walked home, she dared to let herself hope. Maybe he was just being polite. Maybe he would forget her by evening. But maybe, just maybe, Roman Callahan would be different. Roman stood in the livery stable long after she was gone, hands resting on the fence rail. He had seen the way the townsfolk looked at her, like she was some burden they had to endure. It made his gut twist. He knew what it was to be judged, to be whispered about. His late wife, Maybelle, had died 2 years ago, birthing his son and daughter. The town they lived in had blamed him, saying he had been a fool to take on a frail woman. He had packed up his children Daisy and Daniel and started moving horses between towns, trying to find a place that did not wear grief like a noose. He had not planned to stay long in Dawson's Creek. But then he saw Lorraine Vaughn. Saw her strength, the fire she tried to hide. and something inside him said, "Stay." 2 days later, Roman rode out to the Vaughn farm with his wagon. Daisy, a shy little girl of 6, clutched a doll in her arms. Daniel, all of 8 and missing a front tooth, rode up front beside him, chattering about horses. Lorraine was in the yard, hanging laundry. Her hair was pinned up, loose curls escaping in the breeze. She wore a simple blue dress that hugged her curves and made his chest ache. She saw Roman, then the children, and her whole face softened. Roman climbed down, lifting Daisy into his arms. "Miss Lorraine," he said, smiling. "Hope you do not mind the company." Lorraine wiped her hands on her apron. "Of course not. They are beautiful." Daisy peeked at her from behind Roman's shoulder. Lorraine smiled warmly and held out a hand. "Hello, Daisy. I am Lorraine." Daisy hesitated, then reached out and touched Lorraine's fingers. Roman felt a knot in his chest loosen. Daniel jumped down and started talking a mile a minute about horses. Lorraine listened, kneeling to his level, laughing when he told her he wanted a horse big as the sky. Roman watched her. How easily she bent to meet his son's eyes. How she listened like he mattered. He had not seen that in a long time. Lorraine straightened, brushing hair from her face. "You said you needed hay?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am," Roman said, tipping his hat. "I will show you," she said, voice shy but steady. As they walked toward the barn, Roman felt something he had not felt in 2 years. Hope. Real, solid hope. And when Lorraine looked up at him, cheeks pink, eyes bright, he thought maybe, just maybe, this town had gotten it all wrong. Maybe she was not too much at all. Maybe she was just enough. The barn smelled of sweet hay and old wood, the kind of smell that wrapped around a person and made them feel steady. Lorraine led Roman inside, her skirts brushing the packed earth floor. The children trailed close, their small feet kicking up puffs of dust. "We keep the best bales back here," Lorraine said, glancing over her shoulder. "Pa's particular about the cut." Roman followed, noting the neat rows of stacked hay, the careful way the tools were hung on the walls. This was a place cared for by steady hands. "You do all this yourself?" he asked, lifting a bale to test its weight. Lorraine hesitated, then nodded. "Pa took sick last winter. I manage what I can." Roman set the bale down gently. "You do it well." Color rose along her throat, but she did not look away. "Thank you." Daisy wandered over to a small, battered rocking horse tucked in the corner. Lorraine smiled at her, a soft, almost wistful expression on her face. "That was mine," she said quietly. "Pa built it when I was little." Daisy ran her fingers along the worn wood, treating it like something precious. Roman crouched beside her. "You think you could ride a real one someday?" Daisy looked up at him, eyes wide, then to Lorraine as if asking permission. Lorraine knelt beside them, smoothing Daisy's hair. "With someone kind to teach you, I reckon you could." The child beamed, and Roman felt something shift deep in his chest. Daniel, meanwhile, had found a thick rope hanging from one of the rafters. He tugged on it, testing its strength. "What's this for?" he asked. Lorraine stood, brushing straw from her skirts. "We use that for hauling hay up to the loft. Harder work than it looks." Roman ruffled Daniel's hair. "Maybe Miss Lorraine can show you how." Daniel squared his small shoulders. "I'm strong." Lorraine laughed, the sound low and warm. "I can see that." Roman leaned against a post, watching the easy way Lorraine moved among his children, the way she gave them her full attention without hesitation. It stirred something he thought he had buried with Maybelle, an aching, tentative hope that life could be built again. "You plan to stay long in Dawson's Creek?" Lorraine asked, tying her apron tighter at the waist. Roman shifted his hat back a little. "Hadn't decided. Was thinking I might if there's work." Lorraine studied him, her expression unreadable. Plenty of ranchers need strong hands. And the Vaughns could always use another good horse. Daniel tugged Roman's sleeve. "Pa, can we stay? I like it here." Roman met Lorraine's eyes. There was no pity in them, only understanding. A quiet offering. He cleared his throat. "We'll see." Lorraine dusted her palms together. "You'll be needing a place to stay if you do." Roman nodded. I was thinking to ask around town. Lorraine hesitated, then said, There's a cabin behind the church, empty since the preacher left last fall. Needs some fixing, but it's dry. Roman tilted his head. You think the town would let me rent it? Lorraine's mouth quirked in a way that wasn't quite a smile. Preacher never belonged to the town. Belonged to God. I figure he wouldn't mind. Roman chuckled, low and genuine. I reckon not. Daisy tugged Lorraine's skirt gently. Will you be there too? Lorraine knelt again, gathering the little girl close. I'll be nearby, sweetheart. You'll be safe. Roman watched as Daisy leaned into Lorraine's arms without hesitation. His throat tightened. Lorraine stood, brushing straw from Daisy's dress. You'll want to talk to Miss Annie at the church. She keeps the keys. Roman nodded, feeling the weight of the decision settle in his bones. He had been drifting for 2 years, rootless as tumbleweed. Dawson's Creek wasn't much. But standing here, with the smell of hay and the sound of Daniel chattering and Daisy laughing, it felt like more than enough. Lorraine wiped her hands again, though they were already clean. You should come for supper. Tonight. If you're not busy. Roman's heart kicked against his ribs. We'd be honored. Lorraine's cheeks flushed, but she nodded, businesslike. 6 o'clock. Bring your appetites. As Roman guided his children back toward the wagon, he glanced over his shoulder once. Lorraine stood in the barn doorway, the light behind her, her figure strong and steady against the coming evening. Roman tipped his hat and she lifted her hand in return, a small, brave wave. He turned back to the road, a slow, certain warmth blooming in his chest. For the first time in a long while, he was not thinking about where he had been. He was thinking about where he might belong. The sun dipped low behind the cottonwoods as Lorraine set the table with her mother's old willow pattern plates. She wiped her hands on her apron, heart tapping a nervous rhythm against her ribs. It had been a long time since they had company who wasn't passing through or peddling wares. Outside, boots scuffed against the porch. She opened the door to find Roman standing there, hat in hand, with Daisy and Daniel tucked close to his sides. The children looked freshly scrubbed, their hair damp and combed neat. Evenin', Miss Lorraine, Roman said, voice a little rough, like he wasn't used to being welcomed anywhere. Come in, she said, stepping back. The children hesitated just a blink before darting inside, drawn by the smell of stew and the warm glow of lantern light. This smells better than anything I've had in months, Roman said, setting his hat on the hook by the door. Lorraine smiled, a real one that reached her eyes. Hope you like rabbit. Daniel's face lit up. I'm so hungry I could eat a whole bear. Lorraine laughed, guiding them to the table. Roman watched her move, the easy way she balanced the room without fuss or flurry. They bowed their heads for grace, Daniel rushing through the words with the eager impatience of a boy who'd already spotted the biscuits. Lorraine's voice was softer, steadier, filling in the spaces he left behind. As they ate, Daniel chattered about the rope in the barn and how he was sure he could haul a bale if he just got a running start. Daisy listened, her spoon moving slowly to her mouth, her eyes flickering now and then to Lorraine, seeking approval. Roman leaned back in his chair, feeling something he hadn't felt in longer than he cared to admit, peace. When the plates were cleared, Lorraine brought out a small jar of blackberry preserves and slathered them on thick slices of bread. Daisy's eyes widened as Lorraine handed her a piece. My ma used to can berries, Roman said, his voice thoughtful. Had to fight the crows for them some years. Lorraine sat, folding her hands in her lap. Mine, too. She'd make us pick 'em until our fingers were purple. Roman chuckled. Sounds like you had a good one. She was, Lorraine said quietly. Gone 3 winters now. Roman's chest tightened. Lost my Maybelle 2 years past. Their eyes met across the table and for a moment the room seemed to hush around them. No pity, no awkwardness. Just the shared weight of knowing. Daniel broke it, as boys often do, by knocking over his cup with an enthusiastic elbow. Lorraine was up in an instant, dabbing at the spill with a cloth, laughing as Daniel apologized with wide, guilty eyes. It's just water, she said, ruffling his hair. Doesn't hurt a thing. Roman watched her, the way she soothed without scolding, the way she made a mishap feel like nothing at all. When the children began to yawn, Lorraine showed them the small front room where they could settle for a bit. She had laid out quilts on the settee and braided rug, and Daisy curled up without protest, Daniel flopping down beside her like a pup. Back in the kitchen, Roman leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed loosely. "You didn't have to go to all this trouble," he said. Lorraine wiped her hands on a towel, then shook her head. "It wasn't trouble. I like having folks here." Roman's gaze softened. "They already feel at home." She met his eyes, something uncertain but hopeful flickering there. "I'm glad." He stepped closer, slow and sure, not wanting to startle her. "You got a way about you, Lorraine. Makes a man think maybe the world isn't so hard after all." Her breath caught just a little, but she didn't look away. "I ain't much good with fancy words," Roman said, voice low. "But I know what's real." Lorraine swallowed, her hands twisting the towel. "I've been called a lot of things in this town. Real wasn't one of them." Roman reached out, gently taking the towel from her hands and setting it aside. His fingers brushed hers, rough against soft, and he felt her tremble just a little. "They don't see you right," he said. "But I do." Lorraine blinked, a tear slipping free before she could stop it. Roman caught it with his thumb, his touch tender. "I ain't looking for a pretty picture to hang on a wall," he murmured. "I'm looking for someone strong enough to build a life with. Someone who knows what it is to keep going, even when it's hard." Lorraine's voice shook when she answered. "You really see me, Roman?" "I see you," he said, sure and steady. "And I ain't going anywhere." For a long moment, they stood there in the soft kitchen light. Two people who had been battered by the world but not broken, finding something solid in each other. Lorraine reached up, her fingers brushing his cheek, and Roman closed his eyes, leaning into the touch. When he opened them again, she was smiling, not shy, not uncertain, but full and bright, like the first warm day after a long winter. Roman slid his hand to the small of her back, drawing her in slow, giving her every chance to pull away. She didn't. Their foreheads touched, breath mingling, hearts beating steady and sure. Outside, the wind stirred the prairie grass, whispering through the open fields. Inside, in the small, sturdy farmhouse, love took root in the quiet places, strong and certain as the land itself. The next morning dawned cool and clear, the scent of wet earth rising from the fields. Lorraine stood in the kitchen, rolling out dough for breakfast biscuits while Daisy and Daniel chased each other in the yard, shrieking with laughter. Roman leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, watching the children with a look Lorraine hadn't seen on many men, not indulgence, but real, bone-deep joy. "You're good with them," Lorraine said, dusting her hands on her apron. Roman tipped his head slightly, a slow smile pulling at his mouth. "They keep me honest." She cut the dough into rounds, setting them carefully on the baking sheet. "They're lucky to have a father who sees them." Roman stepped inside, the floorboards creaking under his boots. "Takes more than blood to raise young ones right. Takes being there even when you're bone tired and the whole world's heavy on your shoulders." Lorraine paused, her hand hovering over the flour tin. "You carry a lot on your own." He shrugged, but the gesture was tight. "Had to. Ain't a soul out there gonna do it for you." She met his gaze across the room, something unspoken passing between them. Strength recognizing strength. Roman shifted, glancing out the window where Daniel was trying to climb onto the water barrel while Daisy clapped encouragement. "They'll need more than me. A home that don't pack up and move every time the wind changes." Lorraine set the tin down. "You thinking of putting down roots here?" Roman turned back to her, the light catching the lines at the corners of his eyes. "Thinking I'd like to. If there's room." Lorraine swallowed the sudden tightness in her throat. "Always room for good folk." He took a slow step closer, the air between them thick with something fragile and real. "Maybe more than just a place to sleep. Maybe a place to belong." Lorraine's voice barely rose above a whisper. "You'd be welcome." Roman's hand found hers, rough and calloused, warm against her flour-dusted fingers. "I ain't a man who promises easy things. Life's hard even when it's good. But I'd stand by you, Lorraine Vaughn. If you'd have me." Her heart leapt so hard it almost hurt. She squeezed his hand, voice steady. "I don't need easy. I need real." Roman's thumb brushed over her knuckles, slow and certain. "Then you'll have it. All of it." Outside, Daniel whooped triumphantly as he balanced atop the barrel before tumbling off into the soft grass, Daisy's laughter ringing out like bells. Lorraine laughed too, the sound bubbling up from somewhere deep. "They'll need schooling," she said, turning back to the stove, her cheeks warm. "There's a lady teaches out of the church on Sundays. I can talk to her." Roman stepped beside her, reaching for the coffee pot. "Only if you think it's good. I trust your judgment." She poured the rich, dark brew into 2 tin cups. "You don't even know me that well yet." Roman took a careful sip before answering. "I know enough. Some things you feel in your bones." They ate breakfast at the kitchen table, the children tumbling in later with grass-stained knees and wild stories about imaginary battles against rattlesnakes and outlaws. Lorraine listened, her heart full to bursting. Later, Roman helped her patch a loose shutter on the back of the house. Lorraine handed him nails while he hammered, the rhythm steady and sure. "You ever think about what you wanted?" Roman asked, setting the hammer down and wiping his forehead with his sleeve. Lorraine sat back on her heels, considering. "Used to dream about a little house near the river. A garden big enough to feed a family. Maybe a few chickens scratching around." Roman smiled, slow and real. "Sounds like a good dream." She looked up at him, shading her eyes. "What about you?" He leaned against the wall, the wind tugging lightly at his shirt. "I just wanted a place where I could stop running. Somewhere the kids could grow up knowing they're safe." Lorraine reached for another nail, handing it to him. Their fingers brushed and neither of them pulled away. "You think Dawson's Creek could be that place?" she asked. Roman tapped the nail against the wood, thoughtful. "Maybe, if the right people are in it." Lorraine smiled, feeling something inside her settle like a stone finally finding its place in the riverbed. As the afternoon wore on, Roman and the children helped her in the garden, pulling weeds and mending the chicken coop. Daniel found a speckled egg tucked deep in the straw and ran to show her, grinning so wide his missing tooth was on full display. That night, after supper, they sat out on the porch, the stars flaring bright above the wide Kansas sky. Daisy fell asleep curled against Lorraine's side, her small hand clutching the hem of Lorraine's skirt. Daniel dozed on Roman's lap, his head lolling against his father's chest. Roman looked over at Lorraine, his voice low. "Ain't never seen him take to someone so quick." Lorraine brushed a curl from Daisy's forehead, her heart aching sweetly. "Maybe they were waiting for you to find the right place." He reached across the space between them, his hand warm over hers. "Maybe I was." Lorraine squeezed his fingers gently, the night humming with the soft sounds of crickets and far-off coyotes. For the first time in what felt like forever, she wasn't thinking about what she lacked. She was thinking about what she could build. And Roman, steady, kind, and real, was thinking the same. The following Sunday, Roman stood outside the little clapboard church at the edge of Dawson's Creek, his hand resting lightly on Daisy's shoulder while Daniel fidgeted at his side. Lorraine approached along the dusty path, a small basket tucked into the crook of her arm. She wore a pale green dress Roman hadn't seen before, simple but neat, the color setting off the warm brown of her eyes. "You came," Lorraine said, her voice soft but pleased as she drew nearer. Roman tipped his hat. "Didn't reckon I'd miss it." Daisy reached for Lorraine's free hand without hesitation, and Lorraine shifted the basket to her other arm so she could hold it properly. Daniel kicked at a rock, then looked up, grinning. "Miss Lorraine, Pa said after church we can go look at that old cabin. You'll come too, won't you?" Lorraine's smile deepened. "I think I'd like that." Inside, the church smelled faintly of old wood and beeswax. Roman chose a pew near the back, and Lorraine sat beside him, Daisy curled against her hip and Daniel swinging his legs restlessly. The hymns were sung a little off-key, the preacher's words plain and steady, speaking more of kindness and neighborly duty than fire and brimstone. Roman listened, but his eyes strayed often to Lorraine, to the way she bowed her head in prayer, the way she squeezed Daisy's small hand when the girl grew restless. Watching them, he felt something inside him settle deeper, roots finding earth. After the service, they walked together to the empty cabin behind the church. The roof sagged a little on one side and the windows needed reglazing, but the bones were solid. Roman set Daniel down from his perch on the wagon seat and pushed the door open with a creak. Sunlight slanted through the dusty air, catching on spiderwebs in the corners. Lorraine stepped inside, surveying the single room with a critical eye. Won't take much to make it livable. Couple of weeks' work, maybe? Roman rubbed the back of his neck. I can put my hand to it. Won't be fancy, but it'll be ours. Lorraine set the basket on the floor and knelt to examine the hearth. Needs cleaning out, and a proper chimney cap, or the rain'll get in. Roman crouched beside her. I'll see to it. Daniel ran from one side of the cabin to the other, his voice echoing. This can be my corner, and Daisy's can be over there. Lorraine laughed under her breath. They're already making it home. Roman met her gaze, feeling the full weight of the moment settle between them. Wouldn't feel like home without you too. Lorraine's cheeks flushed, but she didn't look away. If you're asking, Roman Callahan, I'm saying yes. He reached for her hand, rough and warm, and she let him pull her to her feet. They stood there, the dust motes swirling around them, while outside, the prairie wind whispered through the grass. Roman brushed a stray hair from her forehead with the back of his knuckle. I ain't got much to offer, just my hands, my heart, and my word. Lorraine smiled, fierce and tender all at once. That's everything. He pulled her close, cradling her against him. In his arms, she didn't feel like too much or not enough. She felt just right. I'll marry you, Lorraine Vaughn, he said against her temple. If you'll let me. She tilted her head back to look into his eyes. I'll marry you, she said, clear and certain. And we'll build something good. They kissed then, a slow, steady sealing of promises made not with grand speeches, but with every steady look, every quiet help, every moment they had already shared. The wedding was simple. A week later, beneath the cottonwoods by the river, with only a handful of neighbors and the preacher to witness, Lorraine and Roman said their vows. Daniel stood proud in a too-big jacket, and Daisy clutched a handful of wildflowers, her front teeth missing but her smile dazzling. Roman's voice, when he spoke his vows, was rough with emotion. Lorraine's hand trembled slightly as she slid the ring on his finger, a plain gold band warmed by the sun. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Roman didn't hesitate. He caught Lorraine up into his arms and kissed her soundly, to the whoops and cheers of Daniel and the shy clapping of Daisy. They moved into the cabin that very evening, the beds already built, the hearth cleaned and burning bright. Lorraine hung her mother's willow plates above the mantel and Roman carved a small cradle for Daisy out of spare pine. In the months that followed, they planted a garden behind the cabin, rows of beans and corn and squash growing strong under Lorraine's careful tending. Roman took work-breaking horses for nearby ranchers and Daniel followed him everywhere, learning the trade with eager pride. At night, after the children were asleep, Lorraine and Roman sat by the fire, her head resting on his shoulder, his arm wrapped around her waist. They spoke little, content with the easy silence built by shared labor and deeper love. One evening, as the first frost silvered the fields, Lorraine turned to him, her hand resting lightly on her belly. Roman set down his whittling knife, his face still and waiting. She smiled, radiant and sure. Come spring, we'll have another. Roman pulled her into his arms, holding her tenderly, reverently. It's a good life, he whispered into her hair. Lorraine nodded against him, tears shining in her eyes. It's our life. And it was. Built not from grand beginnings or easy luck, but from every hard, tender, hopeful step they had taken toward each other. Together, they carved out a place on the unforgiving prairie, a place warmed by laughter, softened by kindness, and made unbreakable by love.